Hey guys, it's Coach Carroll here to guide you through exercise 1 for lab 9. This is the first lab to talk about how do we make these 2D projection view drawings of parts. Alright, so to get started with the lab, you first need to download the drawing template from Moodle here, and then also download the part called Mount 1, which we'll be using to actually make the drawing of. Okay, so here's the solution, all right, for what we'll be making. So we're going to be making this piece of paper here. We've already made this part, all right. So even if you've already made the part from the lab earlier in the semester, still go through and download this part off of Moodle, because I want everyone to be working from the same part that was drawn with the same coordinate system and all that. Okay, so still download this part even if you have it. All right, and we'll make this 2D projection view drawing, which has these 3 views on it and also has all the dimensions that fully document the geometry of the part. And the title block is also updated as well to show you different properties of the part, which you've already defined, such as the material, who drew it, when you started drawing it, this kind of thing. Okay? Alright, so to get started, instead of going to new, we want to open, because we're going to start from the template, which I've already given you. So I've already created a folder on the desktop called Lab 9, and that folder has this drawing template in it, which I downloaded from Moodle. So this is the template that you download from Moodle. So go ahead and open that. Alright. So when you open this template, the first thing you need to do is save it as something else, because you don't want to go ahead and put a part in, start changing things, and then overwrite your template. You want to use that template as the base for every other part drawing for the rest of this class. So don't change your template. So now go to File, Save As, and I've made a subfolder called Exercise 1 within Lab 9, and I'll save this drawing then, just call it Exercise 1. Alright, so now I've saved my template as something else, so I'm not overriding my template. Okay, so what's in this drawing already? Well, if you look over here in the browser, this is kind of like your part browser, but now just for a drawing. So the only thing here is a border. That's this border around the edge. And then you also have the title block, which I've already defined here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we need to actually put in our first view. Okay, so we're going to put in 3 views. So to insert the first view, it's called the base view. Click on base here, and now click here, the folder with the magnifying glass. It's wanting to go find what part are you going to put in. Well, my part is in Exercise 1 folder, and it's called Mount 1. So click on Mount 1 to select that. Go on Open. Alright, so notice Mount 1, it's kind of big right now, right? This piece of paper, the template, is on a regular A4 size sheet of paper. So right now the scale is 1:1. So this is how big the part is in relation to an A4 size piece of paper. And it's too big. I can't fit 3 views on this piece of paper, so we need to change the scale. Let's try a scale of 1 to 2, cut it in half. That's still a little big. It's close. See, about 1 to 4, that's too small. I won't be able to see things good enough. You can custom, make a custom scale. So click here, backspace, and let's make it 2.5. That looks better. Alright. Now this first view that I want is not, it's called the front view, but it's not actually the front. This is actually the top view. Okay, so if what's called the top somehow looks like that. So don't really pay attention to these names, front, top, bottom, left, right. Don't say, oh, well, I have to make the front view this view. Well, not necessarily. These come from that view cube, if you remember, that was in the top right up here when you made your part. These are determined on whether or not you started the drawing on the XY, YZ, or XZ plane. It doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to choose, it will be the bottom for this part, will be will be the bottom left view here. So the view that will go here is called the bottom. Alright, so now I'll click one time and let go, then drag up here, move my cursor here, click again and let go, move my cursor over here, click again, and then I want an isometric view, so I'll click one time. So those are the four views. Notice as I just move my cursor around, if I move it to the left, it's that left side view. Down here, isometric. So these are just all the different views that you could create, different projections. And I just want these three that I've made, so right click and hit create now. Okay, so now one thing I want to do is I want to change this isometric view to where it has color to it. So let's put your cursor close to that view so you see this red dotted line pop up. Double click, so you're editing the view, and you can change the color here. Click on shaded. Now click OK, and you can see it's made it as a color. Alright. Now you don't want to put it up here because you can't. You don't want to have anything ever come outside of your border. Alright, so everything in your drawing, dimensions, whatever, need to be inside your border. But I don't want to put it here as well because you want some space between the border and anything in your drawing. So I'm going to space it out a little bit. Let's pull it in here. Alright. Now if I wanted to change the scale of this one is actually independent of the other three. So I could change this. Let's make it smaller, 1 to 3. Notice it just changed the scale of this isometric view and not the scale of these others. Okay. Alright, so I changed that to 1 to 3. It's good enough there. Okay, now let's start adding some dimensions in here. Let's add the dimension of this line here. So to add dimensions, go to Annotate, turn the Dimension tool on, and so this adding dimensions is very similar to how you added dimensions in a sketch, or sorry, how you defined dimensions in a sketch. Here I'm not defining the dimension, I'm just saying, hey, display the length of this line. Well, it already knows it's 200 because I've defined that in the drawing when I drew the part. Okay, so when I modeled the part, I already defined that length of 200. Now let's dimension, let's say this line. Another way to do that, instead of clicking on this line, say dimension between here and here. Drag out, and there's 75. Now what's this box that pops up? Last time I just clicked OK. So click on the text. That's probably default for you. So these little greater than, less than symbols here say grab the dimension that you already defined in the when you made the part. Alright, so you never want to change this because you want this to be linked to your part. But I could add other text here. I could say this is like a height or something. And notice when I type that text in, it's adding it over here. So you could add other text there if you wanted. You could, under here on Precision and Tolerance tab, you could change how many decimal places are displayed. Go to 0 decimal places, 1, or how many you want. We'll leave it at 2 decimal places. You can specify different tolerances here if you wanted. So 75 millimeters plus or minus some upper dimension here. Let's say some, if we did symmetric, maybe plus or minus 0.1 there, 0.1. Okay, so you could do something like that, and this will again specify the tolerance for how accurate the person making the part needs to be. Okay, but we're not going to add tolerances for this part. We'll just specify the dimensions. Okay, so I've got those two dimensions. Let's add between here and here. So how deep is this cut here? So my dimension tool is still on, so I'll select between this line and this line. Now I can't put it here because all your dimensions need to be outside of the part. They can't be inside of it. Alright, so let's make it outside of the part. Let's just put it there then. Okay. Alright, I'm going to hit escape to exit from my dimension tool. Just click escape. Now if you want to reposition these dimensions, you can click on them and drag them around wherever you need to. Again, you don't want to put it way down here. That's too close to the border. You want these dimensions just a nice even distance away from the part itself, but not too close, not too far away like that, not too close, not right on top of it, just a good easy distance. Okay, you could also click on the number and change it horizontal if you wanted. We'll keep it vertical. Okay, so you can move dimensions around even after you've defined them. Alright, now what else do you notice about this part? No, this part is symmetric. Alright, so I want to add a symmetry line that goes through the middle of this part. So there's several ways to add symmetry lines. I'll first do it with this method here. So click on the center line bisector, and that's just a method of creating a center line between two lines. So I'll want to make a center line between here and here. Notice it created this center line here. Alright, so hit escape. Alright, are there any other dimensions on that view? Let's see. Yeah, there's this, the dimension of the fillets here. Okay. So if I come back here. Now, I wonder if I can use let's try the chamfer. Let's see if this will work. It's not going to work. It's not a chamfer. Maybe the hole and thread. Not going to work. What I'm trying to do is when you add dimensions, you don't want to type many things, because if you type things, what you type is not dynamic. Okay, it doesn't update if you update the part as well. So I want to add a dimension to these fillets here. Alright, so I'll just go to dimension and let's click on this fillet. Notice, don't click on the center of this fillet, but just when the fillet line is red, not when it's snapped to the center point. Alright, so click when the fillet line is red. You could drag it out here, but you don't want it to interfere with that 40. You could do something like this. Gets a little ugly. What if I try to drag it down here? That's kind of in a not the best position. There we go. Okay, notice I just drug it around to a different spot. Okay, and I would prefer not to have it dimension to this kind of extension line that is drawn there. Alright, so I'm going to drag it through. Let's just drag it out here out of the way. Alright, so it's a radius of 10. Click Alright. Now, it doesn't know that there's two of them because I'm just using the basic tool. I wonder if I can add. These are just symbols here. Alright, so it's not necessarily the best thing to do, but I'm going to just add x2 right here. Sorry, 2x, not x2. Type in 2x. Let's put that down below it. Okay, so the 2x means 2 times. Alright, so I added that text which means this fillet is a radius of 10, and there's two of those. There's one here and one here. So that's better to do rather than adding another dimension here as well for a fillet that's the same size. All right. So I think I'm done with that view. Yep, done with that view. Let's move on to this top view up here. Okay. So I'll first start adding, let's add this 60 dimension. All right. Come back here. Okay. Now, remember, you only want to add dimensions one time. So when I'm dimensioning now on this top view, I should not add this 200 here. I don't want to do that because the 200 is already defined down here. All right, so we don't want to add that. And we should also see that this part is symmetric. So I want to add center lines. Now, last time I used this method. I could do that again. This time I'll just use a different method to show you something else. So click on the center line method here. Now I want the center line to go from this center down to this center. Click again, and now I can right click and hit create, and it created that center line. All right, notice this center line extends past the object just a little bit, and I'll do the same method for the horizontal one. Make sure it snaps to the center. Click one time and let go. Move over here, snap there, click another time, and now just right click and hit create. And notice it extends those center lines past the edge of the part a little bit. All right. Now, so those are the lines, the center lines to indicate symmetry, but I also need center marks if I want to indicate the center of a circular shape. And I have some circular shapes here, these holes. So instead of trying to draw the center lines, let's use this tool here. This tool is the center mark. Click on that, and now I just need to select what circular feature to add the center mark. I want that one, this one, this one, and this one as well. So now I've added the center marks. Now click escape to get out of that center mark tool. And now I can go through and add dimensions here. So click on dimension, and I'll add the 60 dimension, the 60 between this hole and this hole, and drag it out and made 60. Okay. So again, when you're dimensioning a part that's symmetric, it's best to dimension between symmetric features in the part. So this part is symmetric with this part, so I need to dimension between those similar or symmetric features there. All right, now do I need a dimension between here and here? Do I need this? It's kind of not the 30. That 30 there. Do I need that 30? Well, no, I don't, because if I know this dimension, let's say I know the dimension between here and here, well, I can figure that 30 out. I can figure it out by doing 120 minus 60, which is 60, divided by 2 is 30. So for symmetric parts, you don't need to dimension from edges to the symmetry part, or to the feature, but just dimension across the center line, as we've shown here, to the partner of the hole. So this hole is partnered with that hole. All right, so I'm going to delete this 30 dimension here. Okay. All right, let's drag this to make sure it's in the middle. Make that in the middle as well. All right. Now you can't have this 60 dimension outside of the 120, because when you're dimensioning these parts, the smaller dimension always needs to be inside so that these dimension lines don't cross. You don't want them crossing. So bring the 60 in here. There you go. All right. Now let's add the horizontal ones here. So go to dimension again, between here and here and drag it out. Just make that, it's 140. Alright. Okay, what other dimension could I add here? Do I need to add? Well, the 75 is not possible to add up here, but it's already done for us. What about this distance here? So if I want to go between here and here, it would, if I put it there, it looks kind of cluttered. Notice these lines cross. This is in the middle of a center line. So that's not a good place to show that 80 dimension, since I already have this 40 dimension here. So if you want to delete a dimension, make sure you're not using the dimension tool. So turn it off by hitting escape, select the dimension and delete. Alright, so I'm going to add that 80 dimension actually up here. Let's drag this up so I have some more space. Okay. Drag this out of the way, down. Alright, so I'm going to add the dimension up here. So click on dimension tool. Let's put it between here and here. Alright, there we go. Now again, the reason I did that was because if I put it down here, it gets cramped, it gets cluttered, lines are crossing. Here, it's much neater. Okay? Alright. So we're looking good there. That's all, almost all. What about these holes here? So these holes, it's a diameter of 16, and the through times 4x. What does that say? The through says they go all the way through the object, and the 4x says there's four holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now, to understand, say this. One way that you could do this would be a bad way, but you could just use the dimension tool and say dimension this one to be 16. Okay, dimension this one to be 16. This one as well, and the same for up here. Okay. Well, you don't want to do that because all these holes are all linked together. So if this one is 16, well, all these are 16 as well. We know that. Okay. So I'm not going to do it like this. Let's delete that. Okay. Instead of using the dimension tool this time, I'm going to use the hole and thread. Alright, so instead of using the dimension tool, I'm going to use this hole and thread tool here. What the hole and thread tool does is it gets information from the whole feature that I use to make the part. So to show you that, I'm going to open the part itself. So go to File, Open. I'm going to open this part that I'm making this drawing from. Alright, so look at this part here. Look in the part browser. How did I create this hole? Drag the end of part up. Well, I first made a box like this. Then I created one hole, and to do that I used the hole feature. Okay, and then to get the other four, well, I did one pattern, and then I did another pattern to make 4 of those. So this one hole here is linked to these other 3 holes through patterns. Okay, so the part, or you've already defined that this hole is linked to these others. So let's use the hole and thread feature just to say, hey, let's get that information that you've already defined. So turn that on, and now let's select this hole here. Click on it one time and drag out, and click again to place that. Okay, now I'm going to hit escape to get out of the hole and thread feature. So notice it gives me the diameter, but it also tells me through, because when I made this hole here, let's come back to this, I double click on the hole feature. Remember, the termination, I made it through all. Okay, so it was already, I've already defined that, so I don't need to type that in again. It's just pulling that information from the part which I've already made. Okay, now there's also 4 of those holes, but I don't want to type that in. I want it to know there's 4 of them because I use the mirror feature. So put your cursor over the text to where it turns red and double click on it, and this edit hole note pops up. So there's different things I could enter here. I could click on this counterbore. It puts the counterbore diameter. Well, this is not a counterbore hole, so that's useless. I'm going to hit enter in here to start another line, and there's this, which is the quantity note. So if I click on the quantity note, okay, it just says however many holes there are, I'm going to put that in there. So quantity note, hit OK, and notice it put the 4x in there for me. So this is good because if I change the number of holes, that text 4x will update automatically. Okay. Alright, so we have one more view over here, and let's look at that view. What else do we need to add? I've not added, I don't think, this 120 or the 15 radius here, the 15 for this half circle hole that's cut out of the top. Alright, we'll come back here. Oops, sorry, I guess I did add the 120 up here. I see that. That's okay. It looks good. I'm going to leave the 120 on that view. So over here, all I need to add is the dimension for this radius here. So let's just pull it out there and make it 15. Or it already is 15. Alright. The last thing I'm going to add here is a symmetry line so that I know the part is symmetric. So let's click on this symmetry line. And let's do it between here and here. Right click and hit create. So I've created that symmetry line there. Notice it added a center mark for me already because of this circular feature. Okay. Alright, so that's all the dimensions necessary to actually make this part. Now, we need to look at the title block. Okay, so notice down here in the title block there was aluminum 6061. Notice I've never typed that in this video. I never typed in axle mount. Where did it get those things? Well, those things were already defined. If I go to the iProperties here, under the summary, the title was already axle mount, or the part number, excuse me. Part number was already called axle mount. The physical, the aluminum 6061 was already selected. Alright, so it just pulled that information from the iProperties and put it here. Okay, but there's still things I need to fill out. What about the title, major, or dimensions? Well, this dimension would be the units of the dimensions. So, since this title block would be used every time that I use this template, I don't want to say, hey, let's make the dimensions, or I don't want to edit the title block to tell the dimensions that they should be millimeters. I just want to add text on top of that, because if I make another part that the dimensions are in centimeters, well, it would be changed because I changed this title block, which is applied to every drawing that uses this template. Alright, so click on text here. And what I'm doing is I'm going to add a text box. So click and drag and release there, and I'll just say mm for millimeters. Click OK. Now I'm going to hit escape. It's kind of stuck up in the top. I'm going to double click again, and let's just change the vertical alignment. Let's change it to middle. Now see how, there you go, that looks better there. So I just changed the vertical alignment to where it's in the middle here, middle justification. Okay, so the dimensions are in millimeters. Now what's your major? You need to add that text as well. Again, click on the text feature and just go add a text box for whatever your major is. Mine's mechanical engineering. spell mechanical engineering, and we'll say PhD because I finished that. Sweet. Alright. Kind of big. We'll take off that part. Okay, so for you, that would be whether you're UG1, UG2, petroleum, mineral, what are you? Alright. And the title, let's add this title to be Lab 9, Exercise 1. Hit escape, and again, whoops, and I forgot to change the justification here. Change the justification to middle. There you go. Now, with the text box tool turned off, I can click and drag this text anywhere. Alright. Now, notice one thing about this text is this is just text. I can drag it anywhere. So, let's say you wanted to add a note in the drawing. And you might want to do this for your projects. You could do this. You could click and drag, and let's say you wanted to add let's say add a note, and say let's say you simplified the semicircle hole. Okay. So remember, in your project, you're going to want to tell me where you made simplifications. How can you tell me that in a drawing? Well, you can define these notes here and just put the text in there. Again, if you want to change the size of the note, you can change the size of the text here, bigger, smaller, okay, add bold, whatever you need to do as a typical word processor there. Okay, let's make this text box a little smaller. So let's say you made a simplification on this semicircle hole right here. I could put a text on there like that. Alright, so that's how you can let me know about the simplifications. Now, another thing you could do, there's also this leader text here. Alright, so let's say you want to point to something specific and give me a note on that. Well, click on leader text. Now let's say I wanted to make a note about, let's say, this hole. So click on this hole, click out here, and then right click and hit continue. Okay, and then I could say simplification, or just say note. Let's say I neglected the threads on this hole. Hit OK. Alright, so now this is just a text box then. Let's actually make that 2 lines so it's shorter. There you go. Okay, so this is just the only thing different about this note. This actually has the leader with it to point specifically to something. So if there's so be very specific when you tell me what simplifications you make. And maybe you can be specific by using these leaders or these arrows to point to where you made the simplifications. Alright, for now I'm not going to need that. Alright, so there's the finished drawing, so make sure to click Save. Now here, this is very similar to the dialog box that popped up when you were making assemblies, and click Yes to All and hit OK. Alright, now the last thing I'm going to show you is how these drawings can dynamically update. So for example, let's say if your boss tells you to make a design change, you need to change the dimensions of this part. So you would not come back here and change the drawing, you go and change the part. So let's say I'm going to change this 200 dimension here. Come back here to the drawing, go find what made that dimension. And here's this box. Let's look at that box. There it is. I used the sketch here, so let's edit this sketch. So you could change this, let's say, to be 220. Alright, finish the sketch. So notice the part update here, but now when I go back to my drawing file, the 200 is updated as well. So I did not have to go back and change that number. This is very nice about dynamic updates and how the drawing files and your assembly files are both linked to the part files themselves. Alright, there it is. So think about your symmetry lines, center lines. Remember to fully define the geometry. Don't forget to populate the fields that you need to in your title block. And that's finished this lab exercise, guys. Alright, have a good day.